Polarity counseling is the idea of applying energy principles to psychology. By energy principles, I mean the forces that we can observe at all scales in nature. The attraction and repulsion that we see with the proton and the electron in the atom, the cyclic appearance of phenomena in the body, arteries and veins, motor and sensory, interpersonal dynamics, parent, child, speaker, listener, and then into larger scales, winter and summer, night and day. At all scales we find polarized field with a rhythmic or cyclic interchange and exchange from the North Pole to the south and back, or the core to the periphery and back. So polarity counseling is a generic term for a host of methods attempting to capitalize on how these phenomena can be recognized and can be used as a guide for corrective, healing experiences in psychological and emotional situations. This is the subject of the book, Dancing with Yin and Yang, exploring many different facets of how to apply energy principles to psychology. Perhaps the best or the biggest or the most advanced, the most efficient method relating to this, in my opinion, is the two-chair method. The two-chair method is a very efficient technique for restoring flow where there has been fixation. According to theory, fixation is the source of problems, and movement is the source of functionality. So in a two-chair arrangement, we could see as if there are two nodes in a field with a recurrent feedback loop between the two nodes. By having two chairs, a person can sit in one chair and make a statement or ask a question, and then they can move to another chair, and they can be either another part of their own self or another person. They can experience becoming momentarily a different state. So we could say there's state A and state B. And when there's a comment or a statement or a question made in one, and then it's exchanged, the person switches over to the other chair and responds. Now we have state A and state B, and we have the beginning of a signal flowing back and forth between the two poles. And I've seen this over and over again. It can be very, very effective. And some of you may be familiar with Gestalt therapy and Fritz Perls, who developed and used the two-chair quite famously. And how polarity counseling is a little different is that it has additional information. It's sort of like Gestalt therapy plus. It has energy anatomy, in which we can observe the person in their speech patterns, their body posture. We can observe how the flow patterns are moving. And that tremendously accelerates or makes it more efficient. We can get ideas about how to work with patterns if we can see their underlying expression energetically. And then secondly, this is a little different from Gestalt in that we are applying a polarity cosmology. And in Randolph Stone's polarity therapy, there's a whole notion of how we are in the world for a purpose, how our gender is not accidental, how there are certain expected patterns and sequences that we can identify as part of our interplay between spirit and matter. And this brings us into sort of an esoteric territory, but in the two-chair method, it's used rather freely in the Polarity Counseling version of two-chair. And then lastly, I would like to mention one other difference is that Peter Levine's work really highlighted the value of pendulation, as so-called. The idea of restoring movement from pole to pole. For example, in somatic experiencing, he does that by having the client notice a body area and then transfer attention to a different part of the body that's not in the primary initial location, and then back. And then he discovered that by having this transfer from one site to another, the autonomic nervous system started to loosen up, started to restore some of its original range of motion. And so we're bringing that understanding in as well. So these are additive to the original concept. I should mention just historically, Fritz Perls did not invent the two-chair. It was invented around 1955, but he gets a lot of credit for mobilizing it, for using it very successfully and making video films, which you can still watch today, of him doing this method. Another player who deserves special mention is Robert Hall, the psychiatrist who was a student of Fritz Perls, as well as Randolph Stone. He developed the two-chair technique quite substantially and still uses it today. Today, this is 2014, he's in his early 80s and still teaching workshops and using the two-chair technique. So welcome to Polarity Counseling, in which we use the energy model, the idea of expansion, contraction, attraction, repulsion, core, periphery, polarized fields. We use that, borrowing it from science, and then applying it into psychology. It's a very useful, very effective link between hard science and psychotherapy.